I'm Kinsley Henderson, 30, a rehabilitation counselor. I finally achieved my dream, a quiet life in my own home. That peace shattered when a process server handed me a thick envelope. The plaintiff's names on the first page? My parents. They were suing me, their only child, for the equity in my house. This wasn't love. This was war. I reread the plaintiff's names, waiting for the prank to end. It didn't. This wasn't a mistake, it was premeditated. They didn't just disapprove of my life, they wanted to dismantle it. That $250,000 wasn't their money, it was my freedom. What does it take for parents to sue their own child? To understand the lawsuit, you have to understand the environment I grew up in. My parents weren't poor, they were obsessively focused on money. Our entire family atmosphere was dictated by the bottom line. Every decision, every purchase, every trip was run through a financial filter of maximizing returns and minimizing costs. Our house wasn't a home, it was a carefully managed financial portfolio. Love was never the currency, control was. They always used the same, manipulative phrase, "Everything we do is for your future." But their vision of my future was simply an extension of their control. They kept meticulous records of every expense they ever made on me, from diapers to school supplies. It turns out those sacrifices were never investments in a daughter, but loans to a subordinate. The fine print on my life was always debt. How did I first realize this obsession was abnormal? Unlike some family drama stories, I wasn't the black sheep. I was the textbook overachieving, rule-following daughter. I did exactly what they wanted, not out of passion, but out of a desperate need to keep the peace. My role was simple: be financially successful enough to contribute, but never independent enough to leave. The pressure was suffocating, and I knew I had to forge my own path, separate from their spreadsheets. The only way out was up and away. I became a rehabilitation counselor, a job that focuses on helping people recover their independence. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was helping others gain the self-sufficiency my own parents tried to deny me. I chose this field because its currency was human worth, not net worth. It was a career they scoffed at, not enough earning potential, they said. That disapproval became my fuel. My career was my first major act of defiance. It felt good to be valued for being me, not my bank account. But my fight for financial control started long before my career. What was the first time I realized my own money wasn't mine? I was 8 years old, sitting on my bedroom floor, counting my birthday money, $50 whole. I felt rich, powerful, and independent for the first time. Then, Mom walked in. She didn't praise me. She said, "That's wonderful, Kinsley. Now, we're going to put that directly into your college fund. It's too important for you to just spend." My joy was instantly replaced with a hollow, sinking feeling. That's when I learned that mine meant theirs. I never saw that $50 again. It was my first lesson in financial deprivation. My ownership was conditional on their approval. This childhood incident set the stage for years of financial control. How did this parental obsession escalate once I started earning my own money? I was 8 years old, sitting on my bedroom floor, counting my birthday money, $50 whole. I felt rich, powerful, and independent for the first time. Then, Mom walked in. She didn't praise me. She said, "That's wonderful, Kinsley. Now, we're going to put that directly into your college fund. It's too important for you to just spend." My joy was instantly replaced with a hollow, sinking feeling. That's when I learned that mine meant theirs. I never saw that $50 again. It was my first lesson in financial deprivation. My ownership was conditional on their approval. This childhood incident set the stage for years of financial control. How did this parental obsession escalate once I started earning my own money? When I turned 16 and got my first real paycheck from the bookstore, I imagined buying my own clothes or saving for a used car. My parents had other plans. They demanded that 80% of my wages be immediately transferred to their family investment account. Their reasoning? We pay for your education and your health insurance, Kinsley. Your contribution is necessary to maintain the family standard. It was a direct financial tax on my independence. My effort was their commodity. I tried to argue, pointing out that none of my friends had to do this, but the conversation ended with an icy lecture about respect and entitlement. The crushing part was the justification. They swore that this money was being aggressively invested and would cover my college tuition in full. They were building this financial empire on my back, promising me a gilded future. It felt like a conspiracy designed to control me. But was that promise real, or was it just another manipulative lie? The moment finally came. I was 18, I had my acceptance letter, and I was ready to claim the future they had supposedly invested in. I asked my parents about accessing the college fund, the one fueled by every birthday dollar and 80% of my teenage wages. I imagined a grand total, confirming their years of sacrifice. I expected celebration. What I got was a stony silence and a sudden, sharp betrayal. The air in the room instantly froze over. My mother cleared her throat. Kinsley, we had an emergency. A family emergency. We had to restructure some investments. The money was gone. Not spent on an emergency, but used to upgrade their car and invest in a risky real estate scheme for them. The college fund was a complete fabrication, a financial holding cell designed to keep my earnings liquid and accessible for their needs. The foundation of my trust crumbled in seconds. I was left with two options: take out massive student loans, or give up my education. The years of hard work, the denied purchases, the humiliation, it was all for nothing. The money was never mine, it was a loan they had forcibly taken and spent. That day, I learned my life was merely a financial tool in their arsenal. The damage was done, and the reckoning began. But this profound betrayal was the catalyst. It forced me to finally seek true independence. What was the absolute last straw that made me move out? After the college fund lie, I had to take out substantial loans, but I made one promise to myself: I wouldn't live under their financial shadow anymore. The final straw came during a screaming match where my father declared I was ungrateful and financially illiterate. I calmly handed them the key. I'm done being your liability and your asset, I said. I'm paying for my own freedom. The silence was more painful than the yelling. Moving into a tiny, shared apartment felt like checking into a five-star hotel. I had very little money, massive debt, and hand-me-down furniture, but I had something priceless: autonomy. For the first time, my spending decisions were mine. If I wanted to buy a $5 coffee, no one could call me frivolous. It was the exhilarating, terrifying feeling of total ownership over my existence. Poverty with peace is better than wealth with control. I worked 2 jobs to pay for school, but the motivation was pure. I wasn't funding their lifestyle, I was investing in Kinsley's future. This move solidified my commitment to my path as a rehabilitation counselor, a field focused on empowerment, not exploitation. It was my ethical revenge. I was determined to build a foundation so solid they could never shake it. The goal was self-sufficiency, not just survival. But why did I choose a profession they actively mocked, and how did that choice later give me the strength to face them in court? After the college fund lie, I had to take out substantial loans, but I made one promise to myself: I wouldn't live under their financial shadow anymore. The final straw came during a screaming match where my father declared I was ungrateful and financially illiterate. I calmly handed them the key. I'm done being your liability and your asset, I said. I'm paying for my own freedom. The silence was more painful than the yelling. Moving into a tiny, shared apartment felt like checking into a 5-star hotel. I had very little money, massive debt, and hand-me-down furniture, but I had something priceless: autonomy. For the first time, my spending decisions were mine. If I wanted to buy a $5 coffee, no one could call me frivolous. It was the exhilarating, terrifying feeling of total ownership over my existence. Poverty with peace is better than wealth with control. I worked 2 jobs to pay for school, but the motivation was pure. I wasn't funding their lifestyle, I was investing in Kinsley's future. This move solidified my commitment to my path as a rehabilitation counselor, a field focused on empowerment, not exploitation. It was my ethical revenge. I was determined to build a foundation so solid they could never shake it. The goal was self-sufficiency, not just survival. But why did I choose a profession they actively mocked, and how did that choice later give me the strength to face them in court? I was operating in total financial isolation from my family. I had to be meticulous. I worked every extra hour, took on freelance consultation gigs, and lived on a budget so tight it squeaked. Every penny went into a high-yield savings account that only I could access. This wasn't just saving, it was my therapy, a daily act of defiance against the theft of my past. I was building my own safety net, stitch by stitch. My goal wasn't a fancy car or designer clothes, it was an anchor. A house. A deed with only my name on it. I envisioned that house as a physical boundary, a place where no one could walk in and demand an accounting of my life. It was the ultimate, tangible symbol of the independence they had spent 2 decades trying to prevent. That house was the finish line of my personal marathon. Every sacrifice was a brick in that wall of protection. I kept my progress strictly confidential. My parents still called occasionally, but the conversation was always a passive-aggressive inquiry into my measly salary or my poor life choices. They assumed I was scraping by, just barely surviving. They didn't realize that my silence was a strategic weapon, allowing me to build my war chest unnoticed. Their ignorance was my greatest financial asset. It took me 8 years of relentless focus, but I did it. I made the down payment. Writing that check was the most profoundly satisfying financial act of my life. It was a reclaiming of every dollar they had stolen, every hour they had exploited. It wasn't just a transaction, it was a silent, powerful declaration of independence. Victory tasted like freedom and freshly signed paper. My blood, sweat, and tears were finally securing my future, not theirs. I knew this news, the news that I had bought a house without their permission, without their money, and without their knowledge, would shatter their illusion of control. I wasn't naive enough to think they'd be happy. I prepared for their disapproval. Their condescending lectures, and their inevitable attempts to claim the achievement. But I underestimated the depth of their financial entitlement. I was ready for a fight, but not a nuclear one. What was their exact, venomous reaction when I finally told them about the house, and how did their mockery quickly turn into a legal threat? I called them with the news, trying to sound proud, not defensive. I bought a house, Mom and Dad. It's official. Silence. Then my mother sighed, deep and dramatic. A house? Kinsley, dear, are you sure? Is it in a safe neighborhood? We always told you to wait for a major market correction. It was a masterful display of toxic redirection, turning my triumph into a questionable mistake. They couldn't share joy if they couldn't control it. My father jumped in with the real jab. How did you even qualify for a mortgage on a rehabilitation counselor's salary? Unless the house is a total shack, you must be crippling yourself with debt. He was mocking my job, the one thing that was purely mine. He weaponized my self-sufficiency, trying to turn my achievement into a shameful, desperate act. They couldn't stand that I did it without them. Then came the financial punchline. We need to talk about the equity, my mother announced. Since we laid the financial groundwork for your life, and since you didn't ask us for advice, the least you can do is sign over a percentage of the equity in your new house. It's fair compensation for the years we spent supporting your little job. Their entitlement was a bottomless pit. That was the moment I stopped being the dutiful daughter and became the boundary setter. Absolutely not, I said, my voice shaking slightly, but firm. This house is mine. I paid for it. If you believe you are owed something, you can talk to my lawyer. I gave them the legal avenue they craved, but I knew I was giving them the weapon to destroy what little relationship remained. I had issued the ultimate threat, legal action. Their response was instantaneous fury. They didn't hang up, they screamed. Threats of ruining me, of exposing my financial failures to my colleagues. I ended the call knowing I had just declared war. But even I, the cynical survivor, never imagined they would go through with it. Never imagined they would file an actual lawsuit against their own flesh and blood. They didn't just want equity, they wanted total obliteration of my self-worth. The paper I received a few days later confirmed it. The gloves were off. It was court time. How did I manage to build a legal case strong enough to dismantle 2 decades of their financial manipulation? Closing day was intensely emotional. Not because of the big mortgage, but because I was finally signing my name on a document that acknowledged my worth, independent of my parents' ledgers. I looked at the closing attorney, the title officer, and I realized I was there because of my discipline, not their leverage. I was the principal. I was the client. The pen felt like a wand of liberation. When the realtor handed me the keys, I didn't thank her immediately. I drove to the house, unlocked the door, and stepped onto the squeaky hardwood floor. The house was empty, echoing, and perfect. The air was heavy with possibility. For the first time in my 30 years, I was standing in a space where the air was entirely free of judgment and financial scorekeeping. This was my true, silent victory parade. I walked through every room, mentally drawing boundaries. This was my sanctuary, built with every dollar they claimed was owed to them. This house was tangible proof that their narrative of me, the financially illiterate, ungrateful daughter, was a lie. They controlled paper and spreadsheets, but they couldn't control bricks and mortar. My independence was finally etched in stone, not on a joint bank statement. The house was the fortress, I was the sole key holder. I knew the peace wouldn't last. Telling my parents was not about sharing joy, it was about laying down the challenge. It was a calculated risk. I needed them to know I was finally untouchable, but I knew the news would detonate their resentment. I was ready for the lecture, the mockery, the guilt trips, and the passive-aggressive threats. I took a deep breath, dialed their number, and delivered the one sentence they couldn't handle: I bought a house. The trap was sprung, but the prey was free. Their initial silence was terrifying, quickly followed by the verbal demolition I anticipated. They didn't ask the location or the size, they demanded the equity split. When I refused, the true colors of their financial entitlement shone through. They didn't say, "We love you." They said, "You owe us." Their demand wasn't a request for connection, it was a hostile financial takeover bid. The fight was officially over the deed, not the daughter. When I told them to talk to my lawyer, I meant it as a threat, a boundary I hoped they wouldn't cross. But they took it as an invitation. A few days later, the lawsuit papers arrived, formalizing their decade-long grievance and attempting to reclaim the $250,000 of my home's equity. They sued their own child for unjust enrichment because I successfully built a life they couldn't profit from. The victory of that day was immediately overshadowed. The legal battle for my home was the final reckoning. How could I possibly fight this monstrous legal claim rooted in 20 years of emotional and financial manipulation? I remember the exact moment the lawyer's letterhead blurred into focus. The claim was for unjust enrichment and breach of implied contract. My parents weren't just seeking repayment for their supposed sacrifices, they wanted $250,000, nearly all the equity I'd built. They used cold, transactional language to dismantle the last remnants of our familial bond. This was the real value of their love. Their complaint itemized every financial contribution they had made since my birth, including diapers, school fees, and the infamous college fund. They argued that every dollar they spent was a de facto loan that I was now refusing to repay by buying a house without their consent. They weaponized my entire childhood against me, turning my existence into a meticulously calculated debt. I wasn't a daughter, I was a balance sheet. The initial tears of betrayal quickly dried. This wasn't a family dispute anymore, it was a business transaction, legally framed. And if they wanted a fight, they would get one. My background in rehabilitation counseling, focusing on strategy, empowerment, and breaking down barriers, kicked in. I realized I had spent my entire life unintentionally training for this exact legal war. I needed a lawyer, but I had the arsenal. My years of being audited by my parents suddenly became my greatest asset. They kept meticulous records of every expense they made, and I, in turn, had kept meticulous records of every dollar they took. I had years of emails, bank statements, and even childhood birthday cards detailing their investments. They built a mountain of paper to claim ownership. I would use that very same paper to bury them. I knew their playbook better than they did. I found a lawyer specializing in family estate disputes and, crucially, emotional abuse. I presented her with the decades of documentation. She didn't just see a lawsuit, she saw a pattern of calculated, coercive control. Her eyes widened when she saw the 80% wage demand and the phony college fund. We weren't just defending my house, we were seeking vindication for my life. The tide was turning, one document at a time. But to truly win, we needed to expose a detail about their financial past that even they thought was buried forever. What was the secret that ultimately ended their reign of financial control? Entering the courtroom felt like stepping onto a stage for the final act of a toxic play. My parents sat opposite me, their faces masks of righteous indignation. They looked like the victims. They were there to be validated for their loans and sacrifices, not to face judgment for their abuse. The air crackled with decades of unspoken resentment. I was the ungrateful defendant, they were the financially savvy plaintiffs. The only truth that mattered was about to be revealed. Their lawyer opened with the emotional appeal, detailing the costs of raising me. But my lawyer, a genius, swiftly countered with their documentation. She showed the court the 80% wage transfer demand, the fake college fund statements, and the internal family emails detailing my purchases. She framed their actions not as parental support, but as a pattern of coercive financial control. Their own records were the nails in their coffin. When I took the stand, I didn't cry. I spoke as a rehabilitation counselor. In my professional opinion, their actions were designed to foster dependency, not independence. The goal was to maintain me as a perpetual financial resource. The constant surveillance and appropriation of my earnings meet the criteria for financial abuse in a guardianship context. I turned my pain into professional analysis. My mother couldn't handle the truth being presented so clinically. She jumped up, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She's lying. We sacrificed everything. She's just an ungrateful little." The judge immediately called for order. It was the public, unscripted confirmation of the toxicity my lawyer needed. Their mask finally shattered in court, then came the true climax, the final, devastating move. My lawyer presented a single document, an old, dusty bankruptcy filing from years ago, showing that the $50,000 college fund money was never invested but immediately used to settle personal, undisclosed debts. My parents looked physically sick. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had committed fraud against the court years ago, a secret they thought was buried. The courtroom gasped. The judge's expression turned glacial. This was the real revenge, the exposure of their deepest lie. What was the exact legal ruling that the judge delivered to finally end my parents' financial control forever? My lawyer, Ms. Davies, didn't rely on emotion. She relied on the ledger. She began by systematically dismantling their narrative of sacrifice, showing their claim $4,250,000 was wildly inflated. The plaintiffs claim debt, she stated, but the evidence shows a long-term profit margin on Ms. Kinsley's existence. She introduced the meticulous documentation I had saved, the bank statements and the emails. It was time to fight fire with financial fire. Ms. Davies zoomed in on the 80% wage demand, presenting a graph showing my net loss versus their home renovation expenses during my teenage years. The connection was undeniable. This was not a loan, it was appropriation. The funds were immediately commingled with their personal finances, including payments for their timeshare and a luxury cruise. My parents' faces were priceless, a mixture of shock and sheer panic. My sweat paid for their vacation. The fatal blow was the college fund. Ms. Davies produced an email where my mother instructed me to lie to my friends about the fund's existence. Then she showed the final transaction, proving the funds were withdrawn and used to prop up the parents' struggling investment portfolio, which subsequently failed. It was financial cannibalism, laid bare for the judge to see. The illusion of their investment vanished. Ms. Davies then played her ace card, the old bankruptcy filing. The motion stated that my parents had signed under penalty of perjury, affirming they had disclosed all assets and liabilities. The court filing revealed they failed to disclose the joint accounts used to funnel my wages, suggesting potential fraud on the court. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. My parents' faces went white. The betrayal was now a criminal matter. Having obliterated their credibility, Ms. Davies switched from defense to offense. Your Honor, based on the documented pattern of financial abuse, the fraudulent misrepresentation of the college fund, and the potential perjury regarding the bankruptcy filing, we request not only that the plaintiff's suit be dismissed with prejudice, but also that Ms. Kinsley be awarded compensatory damages. The whole narrative flipped in a matter of minutes. The hunter became the hunted. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for the judge's response. My parents' entire world, built on financial manipulation and a lie, was crumbling before their eyes. The legal system, which they had tried to weaponize, was now turning against them. The judge cleared his throat, a sound that sealed their fate. The time for reckoning was now. What was the devastating final judgment, and what did that ruling ultimately cost my parents beyond money? The silence after the verdict was the deepest peace I had ever known. No phone calls, no email audits, no unexpected visits, just the simple, unadulterated sound of my life. The restraining order was the final, non-negotiable boundary. It wasn't a punishment, it was a prescription for survival. I finally started to unpack the emotional baggage they had forced me to carry for 30 years. My home was truly my haven now. The $95,000 in damages arrived eventually. It wasn't money for pleasure, it was a financial scar. I used it immediately, paying off the remnants of my law firm's fees and investing the rest in a trust one set up exclusively for myself. The funds represented the final closing of the debt ledger between us. It was the legal confirmation that they owed me, not the other way around. No contact meant no more conflict. I found immense strength in helping others break free from manipulative cycles. My professional life suddenly gained a powerful new dimension. I had the knowledge, the legal proof, and the empathy to guide victims toward their own independence. But this journey wasn't just about financial liberation, it was about love. The healing had finally begun. Did I ever find a truly healthy, supportive relationship built on mutual trust? And how did I learn to trust again after such profound betrayal? After the initial shock of the verdict, the silence was broken, not by an apology, but by one final, manipulative attempt. A letter arrived via my lawyer's office. I hesitated, expecting remorse, but knowing their pattern. I was guarded because, for narcissists, an apology is just another tool of control. I had to read it, but I didn't have to believe it. The letter was a masterpiece of victimhood. They spoke of their heartbreak and their misunderstanding, never acknowledging the fraud or the coercion. The closest they got to an apology was, "We regret that you felt we wronged you." It was the classic non-apology, shifting the blame onto my perception. They were grieving the loss of their asset, not the loss of their daughter. Their words held no power over me anymore. That was the end of the line. I didn't write back. I simply instructed my lawyer to file a request with the court to permanently maintain the restraining order. I learned that you don't owe manipulative people closure, you owe yourself peace. Their communication attempts stopped when they realized they could no longer elicit a reaction or extract information. The door was shut and bolted forever. I eventually heard, through non-family sources, that they were forced to sell their perfect home to pay the court-mandated damages. They had to downsize drastically. The house they were so proud of, the one they used to shame me, became the final collateral for their toxic debt. I didn't feel joy. I felt a cold sense of justice. They got the market correction they'd always boasted about. Their facade of success crumbled completely. The absence of my biological parents left a void, but I quickly filled it with healthy connections. My lawyer, Ms. Davies, became a mentor. My close friends became my chosen family, a support system built on true reciprocity, not financial obligation. I realized family isn't about blood, it's about the people who see your worth and don't try to monetize it. My life was finally built on solid ground. I now use the term financial fencing in my practice, the art of building impenetrable barriers against those who seek to use you as an ATM. The no-contact rule was my most powerful boundary. It wasn't about hate, it was about self-preservation. You can't heal when the source of the poison is still flowing into your life. Self-preservation is a form of love. Years later, I received one last, bizarre communication, an unmarked box at my doorstep. It contained the baby blanket they'd mentioned in the lawsuit and a small note simply saying, "We miss our little girl." It was a desperate, final attempt to bypass the legal walls with emotional manipulation. I didn't open the note fully. I took a picture of the box as evidence, then had my lawyer send a swift cease and desist. Manipulation never truly dies, it just adapts. I look at the legal victory not as revenge, but as the moment I legally and unequivocally became an adult. The ultimate freedom isn't the money or the house, it's knowing that you can stand up to the people who programmed you for dependency and win. I didn't destroy them, their own actions and entitlement did. They are merely the consequence of their own choices. They chose money over me, and the court chose justice over their fiction. The legal chapter is closed, but the healing is a continuous process. The victory was in the realization. So, what specific steps did I take to ensure my professional career became an advocate for others facing financial family abuse? And what is my biggest piece of advice for escaping the cycle? I spent months in therapy not trying to repair the relationship, but trying to understand the wiring. My therapist and I agreed, their behavior wasn't just greed, it was deep-seated insecurity and financial narcissism. They viewed my success not as a source of pride, but as a threat to their control and a resource to be harvested. They needed me to be perpetually beneath them. My parents grew up fearing poverty. They confused control with security, and they saw me as an insurance policy. Every dollar they took wasn't malice, but a desperate, flawed attempt to stabilize their own fear. It didn't excuse the abuse, but it provided the necessary context for me to let go of the emotional burden. They were prisoners of their own fear. I found a detached form of empathy. I could pity the damaged people they were, without excusing the horrific things they did. Forgiveness was unnecessary, distance was the cure. I stopped waiting for them to apologize and realized that their inability to admit fault was a symptom of their brokenness. I closed the book on their chapter. People ask if I got my revenge. My answer is no. Revenge is emotional, justice is fact-based. I sought justice, which inadvertently led to the consequence they deserved. The greatest revenge I could ever have was building a successful, healthy life that they could never touch, let alone profit from. That is the ultimate unjust enrichment I claimed for myself. Justice was my personal triumph. The whole ordeal transformed my career and my life. It gave me a voice and a purpose far beyond my job title. Now, I use the legal precedent from my own case to advocate for others. But what were the unexpected positive developments in my life that only became possible after I finally won my freedom? Winning the lawsuit wasn't a final act, it was a powerful catalyst. My career as a rehabilitation counselor evolved. I started leading workshops on financial codependency and family abuse recovery. I finally had the authority, not just the theory. I used my own case as an anonymous but powerful case study to help others build financial fences. I turned my trauma into a toolkit for others. The biggest fear after all that manipulation was letting anyone truly close. But I started dating Chris, someone entirely outside my old circle. He listened without judgment when I told him about the lawsuit. He never saw my financial security as something to be leveraged, he saw my strength. For the first time, a relationship felt like a mutual partnership, not a zero-sum negotiation. True love shouldn't feel like a contract. Did I ever get that genuine apology? No. Did I need it? The old Kinsley did. The new one realized that waiting for their regret was just giving them residual power. Their non-apology was actually a gift, the final proof that they would never change, which made my decision to maintain distance easy. Freedom meant needing nothing from them. I learned that the greatest cost of their lawsuit wasn't the $95,000 they had to pay me, it was the total, irreparable loss of their daughter. I was gone. They chose control over connection. They chose money over me. They gained a legal file but lost the future possibility of a functional family relationship. Their choice was the final, devastating sentence. Independence isn't just about financial freedom, it's about being the sole author of your own life's narrative. I didn't need their approval for my home, my career, or my love life. I stopped filtering my choices through the lens of their judgment. I was finally living a life that was authentically mine, for the first time ever. The freedom tasted sweeter than any revenge. My parents sued me for my life, and in the end, they gave it to me. The ultimate family revenge story isn't about crushing them, it's about rising up, unbroken, and building a life so magnificent they can only watch from the outside. That's the real victory. The end of their control was the start of my story. So, what specific strategies did I teach my clients to break free? And what one crucial piece of paperwork do you need to safeguard your independence right now? The court verdict wasn't just a legal document, it was an earthquake that fractured the whole extended family. Suddenly, all the silent, judgmental relatives who backed my parents started taking sides. Some offered belated support, admitting they'd always suspected my parents' financial schemes. Others doubled down, accusing me of destroying the family for a little money. The truth was too uncomfortable for some to handle. My siblings were the most heartbreaking silents. They remained emotionally neutral, terrified of losing the financial safety net they still depended on. They couldn't side with me, but they couldn't openly defend my parents' fraud either. Their inaction was their choice. And it defined our relationship moving forward. Professional distance, no shared history. Their fear was stronger than their sense of right. Because of the bankruptcy documents and the coercive control ruling, the local media picked up the story, "Daughter wins big against controlling parents." I kept my face anonymous, but the case details went viral, sparking massive online discussions about financial family abuse. I used the public attention not for fame, but as leverage for my professional platform. My private war became a public conversation. The flood of emails from strangers was staggering. People shared their own stories of financial exploitation by parents. I realized I wasn't an anomaly. I was part of a silent army. The public support was the validation my parents' manipulation had tried to deny me for decades. This unexpected community gave me the final push I needed to fully embrace my independence. I realized my fight was for so many others. Using the legal framework from my case, I created a free online resource, a guide to document and legally challenge financial abuse within families. I called it the Ledger of Independence. This was the positive, tangible legacy of the lawsuit. I shifted my focus entirely from recovering to preventing financial codependency in others. I built my own platform on their ruins. Years passed. Then, one day, I saw an email from my father's old address. Subject line, "We need to talk." I didn't open it. I knew the drill. Any contact would only be a manipulative attempt to mitigate the consequences of their life choices. I hit delete without a second thought, confirming that my emotional freedom was complete. Delete was the only answer needed. My parents defined success by wealth and control. I redefined it by peace and genuine connection. I am financially stable, emotionally secure, and surrounded by people who love me unconditionally. My life is quiet, honest, and mine, the opposite of the chaos they inflicted. That is the true measure of my victory. I chose real over status. For anyone out there caught in this cycle, documentation is your defense. Legal action is your last resort, but it is a powerful tool for liberation. Don't let shame keep you captive. The greatest boundary you can set is to refuse to play their game anymore. The price of freedom is high, but the price of staying is your soul. Your peace is non-negotiable. I never wanted to destroy them, but I needed to save myself. And in the process, I found a new purpose. My victory wasn't just personal, it became a beacon for others. That's the true story of family revenge. You don't get even. You get better. You use their attempt to crush you as the very foundation to build something magnificent. They lost their home, their reputation, and their only child's respect. I gained my life. I am Kinsley, and this is my story of financial liberation. Thank you for watching. Now, for a final deep dive, what were the 3 most critical pieces of evidence I used in court, and what does the future hold for the Ledger of Independence? This is where my story ends, and my future begins. Amidst the flood of hate mail and non-apologies, one email stood out. It was from my Aunt Clara, my mother's sister, a woman who'd been estranged from the main family for years. She wrote simply, "I read the papers. I always knew their success was a facade built on manipulation. You did the right thing, Kinsley. You didn't destroy the family, you saved yourself from their destruction." Her validation was a soothing balm on an old wound. Aunt Clara's call provided the perspective I desperately needed. She revealed that my parents had pulled similar financial stunts on her decades ago, which led to her cutting contact. "They preyed on the weakest financially," she said. "You were their biggest source. But you also had the strength to fight back. Never apologize for demanding honesty." I realized I was a survivor, not a destroyer. My cousin Mark reached out, too. He'd always felt marginalized by my parents' constant boasting. He said, "I'm glad someone finally pulled back the curtain." Our new relationship was built not on shared holidays, but on a shared understanding of generational trauma and financial toxicity. It was a small, quiet victory that meant more than the $$95,000. I found family in the rubble of the old. When you're dealing with narcissistic family abuse, you're often gaslit into doubting your own reality. The fact that objective members of the extended family, people with no financial stake, came forward was huge. It was independent validation that my perception was correct and my fight was justified. It healed the deep-seated self-doubt my parents had programmed into me. The truth always finds its witnesses. My true family became a carefully curated collection of people: Chris, my chosen friends, Aunt Clara, and Mark. We share boundaries, respect, and mutual support, none of the old obligation or financial strings. This healthy, peaceful environment is the final piece of the puzzle. I finally know what it means to be safe at home. Blood might bind, but respect unites. The end of their control was the start of my real life. The support I received, both public and private, taught me that my story has power far beyond me. It's a blueprint for others. The question remains, what were the 3 most crucial financial fences I taught my clients to build immediately after hearing my story, and which one is the easiest for you to start today? The healing process continues, backed by my chosen tribe. I leased a small office space for my consulting work. It was quiet, organized, and entirely financed by me, for me. Every detail, the desk, the lighting, the coffee maker, was a choice made without external approval. My work is no longer a means to appease, it is a means to empower. The peace of mind I gained far outweighed the years of financial gain they stole. Every morning felt like a fresh, clear start. Learning to trust a partner who saw me as an equal, not a resource, was a gradual, beautiful process. Chris and I share joint accounts for shared expenses, but maintain our own separate savings and investments. This isn't distance, it's a healthy financial boundary built on respect and full disclosure. He values my independence, not my dependency. I finally understood what true partnership felt like. I became a master of the word no to unexpected social requests from extended family trying to keep the peace. No to any inquiry about my finances. No to any relationship that felt transactional. The power of the word no is the cornerstone of healing from codependency. It's a full sentence, and it requires no explanation. My time and energy are finite and precious. The Ledger of Independence wasn't just a website, it was the ultimate strategic guide. The first crucial step I advise is creating a financial timeline, documenting every request, transfer, and transaction, the exact method I used to win my case. This turns emotional memories into irrefutable legal facts. Documentation is your path from victim to victor. The second strategy is to implement a legal audit. I guide clients to review all joint accounts, shared deeds, or any documents granting familial power of attorney. Disentangling those legal ties is often the hardest, most necessary step. This is where you physically reclaim the legal aspects of your life that were compromised. Severing the ties is the first true act of rebellion. The final, and easiest, financial fence is a digital detox. Change every password, close joint email accounts, and secure your devices. My parents' surveillance was largely digital. Cutting off that invisible wire is crucial for mental peace. You can't have emotional privacy if you don't have digital security. Secure your data, secure your sanity. The ultimate purpose of my platform is to turn a private trauma into public empowerment. I speak to the audience I was years ago, the trapped, the financially confused, the emotionally gaslit. My victory became their lesson plan. The healing is collective, not singular. I know I've made a difference. And that's a legacy far richer than any inheritance. My pain now serves a greater good. The noise is gone. The anxiety is minimal. There's a quiet luxury to a life free from conflict, the luxury of choosing a book over a lawyer's brief. This peace is the ultimate dividend of my legal fight. I traded manufactured drama for genuine serenity. I wouldn't trade this quiet life for all the false approval in the world. My true value is intrinsic, not transactional. This story isn't just about a daughter suing her parents. It's about a decades-long financial cage match that I won by following the facts, demanding justice, and refusing to be silenced. My parents lost more than money, they lost their leverage. I won more than money, I won my identity. If you take one thing away, let it be this: your healing journey begins the moment you stop waiting for your abuser to change and start demanding the life you deserve. That moment of choice is everything. Your healing is your greatest triumph over their toxicity. And on that note, what's the single most important legal document I advise every client to update immediately? And how can you protect yourself from future manipulative attempts? As years passed, the lawsuit stopped being my central narrative. The name of my parents' former business, the one they used to defraud me, faded from public memory. They became a cautionary tale, a footnote in a niche legal discussion. I realized that the greatest silence wasn't their lack of contact, it was the slow erasure of their social leverage. Their legacy shrank, mine expanded. I occasionally drove past their old neighborhood, the perfect house now occupied by a new, anonymous family. That house, which symbolized their entire toxic system of control, was gone. It was a physical testament to the fact that money can't buy respect, and that pride will always precede the fall. I felt pity for their loss, but zero regret for the action that caused it. The illusion of their success was definitively broken. The ultimate legacy of the trial wasn't the damages, it was the final, non-negotiable legal record. The court's findings on financial fraud and coercive control served as an impenetrable shield. It didn't just win me money, it established the definitive truth of the relationship, protecting me legally forever. The truth, cemented in law, was my security. So many people seek closure from the people who hurt them. I learned that closure is an inside job. It's not a conversation, it's a decision. I closed the chapter myself by choosing to live a happy, high-functioning life that required none of their input or approval. That choice freed me from the emotional tether I didn't even know was there. I became the author of my own peace. My platform, the Ledger of Independence, continued to grow, fueled by the evidence I collected for the trial. It covers everything from establishing legal residency separate from parents to auditing years of suspicious transactions. My entire purpose shifted from being a victim of financial abuse to being a specialist in recovery and prevention. I am healing through helping others. Winning wasn't about watching them suffer. Winning was being able to look at my current life, my honest, loving relationship, my autonomous business, my quiet home, and know that it's all mine, built on truth and integrity. They tried to trap me in a life of servitude. I chose a life of sovereignty. My freedom is my ultimate reward. The most powerful sign of healing is when you can go an entire week without the thought of your abusers crossing your mind. The emotional energy they once demanded is now channeled into my own growth. They became irrelevant. And that is the true, quiet revolution. Irrelevance is the worst fate for a narcissist. I mourned the family I thought I had, but I celebrated the one I chose and built. The support from Clara and Mark was proof that not all blood is rotten. But the core lesson is, you must prioritize your own peace and financial health above the approval of your toxic family. My chosen is stronger than their blood. The legal records stand. The financial freedom remains. The emotional walls are built. This is the enduring truth of my family revenge story. The only way to truly win is to deny your abusers the stage and build a new, thriving existence off script. Their power diminished because I removed the source of their supply, me. My victory is not a moment, it's a way of life. My hope is that my journey inspires you to find your own finality. So, what specific psychological techniques did I use to combat the lingering shame and gaslighting? And how can you tell if an apology from an abuser is truly genuine? The ultimate symbol of my liberation was the house. I bought a small, older home entirely in my own name, financed solely by my income and the legal restitution. It wasn't their lavish, showy mansion, it was solid, secure, and entirely mine. Signing those papers felt different than any contract before. It was an act of final, absolute self-sovereignty. I bought the quiet, not the status. Every choice in that house was a defiance. My parents demanded neutral, pale colors. I painted the living room a deep, unapologetic emerald green. I filled the bookshelves with titles they would have ridiculed. The freedom to choose ugly furniture, if I wanted to, was the purest form of luxury. It was my space, built only to please me. My decor was a tribute to my new autonomy. The most essential feature of my new home wasn't the square footage or the backyard. It was the simple, sturdy lock on the front door. Knowing that I could turn that key and know for certain that the chaos, the manipulation, and the demands could not physically enter was profound. That door represented the final, unbreakable boundary. My house is a fortress of peace. Sundays used to be a performance, mandatory family brunch, followed by a detailed interrogation about my professional goals and finances. Now, Sundays are silence. Sleep. Reading. The absence of obligation is the richest form of wealth I acquired. My calendar is no longer dictated by the fear of disappointing people whose approval was never genuinely earned. My time is my own capital. The best part of the new home is hosting the family I chose. Aunt Clara and Mark were the first guests. There was no tension, no boasting, just laughter and real connection. It's a space where I can be completely authentic without the need to filter my words or guard my wallet. This is what family is supposed to feel like, safe and restorative. Building new memories erases the old trauma. I learned to manage my money with meticulous care, not out of fear, but out of respect for my own hard work. The future financial goals, retirement, travel, are clear and entirely dependent on my choices. There is no shadow debt hanging over me, no invisible string pulling my resources away. That stability is the most profound gift of all. My net worth is directly tied to my self-worth. For so long, I was paying an emotional mortgage to my parents, my time, my energy, my guilt. The lawsuit was the final, non-refundable payment that settled the account. The house is paid for by actual money, my soul is paid for by courage. I have no emotional debt left to settle. Emotional debt is the heaviest burden. My greatest piece of advice on starting fresh? Don't seek permission for your happiness. Don't wait for your abuser's downfall to start living. Build your new life in spite of them, not because of them. Your success is the most powerful piece of evidence you can present to the world. Take control of your own narrative. This entire saga, the debt, the lawsuit, the victory, the new home, has a single enduring message: you are the architect of your own destiny. The toxic foundations of the past do not have to define your future structure. My new home is not just wood and stone, it's a monument to resilience. I hope that by sharing the blueprint of my liberation, you are inspired to draw up your own plans for independence. The old relationships faded, the truth remains, and the new life flourishes. The structure of my new life is unbreakable. Now, for our final tactical look, what is the single biggest financial red flag I advise all clients to watch out for in controlling family members? And how do you legally remove yourself from a joint lease or mortgage without their consent? Thank you for trusting me with your time. If you're ready to build your new start, all the tools, the Ledger of Independence, the Financial Timeline Guide, are in the description below. Don't just watch this story, use it as your catalyst. I want to leave you with this final, critical thought. Every achievement you've earned, the degree, the promotion, the savings account, the stable relationship, is yours. Your toxic family will try to claim it, minimize it, or use it to manipulate you. Do not let them. Your success is not their collateral, it is your sovereignty. Claim it, guard it, and build upon it. Own your wins, completely and fiercely. If this video was your moment of clarity, let me support your next step. Check out the description for the Ledger of Independence, and tell me in the comments, what is the single biggest achievement you are now ready to claim completely as your own? If my whole journey had to be condensed, these are the 5 life lessons I want you to internalize today. Lesson 1. Documentation is protection. Every email, every text, every dollar requested is evidence. Lesson 2. Legal truth outweighs emotional truth. The court doesn't care about guilt, they care about facts. Focus on the facts. This shift in perspective is your greatest weapon. Be a collector of facts, not just feelings. Lesson 3. Independence is not selfishness. Prioritizing your financial and emotional security is the most responsible thing you can do for your future. Lesson 4. Peace is the ultimate win. The real revenge is living a quiet, happy life that requires zero involvement from the people who tried to break you. Measure your success in serenity. Stop seeking their approval. And finally, Lesson 5. You can choose your family. Blood doesn't always mean loyalty. Seek out individuals who see your value, not your usefulness. Remember these 5 truths. They are the keys to your liberation. Now, let's turn these lessons into action. Click the link below for your next step. Your journey to peace starts now.